there's a group of people for whom, if anything comes from a major authoritative scientific institution, they assume it's part of the Great Conspiracy. And it's the standard model bias and whatever. Well, that's just silly, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that comes out of major universities that empirically works. Like, we test it and it makes better computers. Like, it fucking works. There's no question. It's a real thing. And then on the other side, the idea that there's this perfect, beautiful thing called the peer review in the halls of academia that just does the perfect epistemics, and there's no ego or bias, and the finances that influence the nature of what's being researched don't play a role at all. That's just silly, right? And there's so much stuff now where we have seen people that are actively falsifying and fucking up their research, or even where they're not doing that, but like somebody puts something that is gibberish on purpose into peer review, and it gets published in an article in a place like Nature, and people peer review stuff based on the politics of who they need to get on the good side of for their own career advancement. And then even things like, okay, well, even if something isn't wrong, the things that are getting funded are the things that somebody wants to fund because they see that there will be an ROI on that. And there might be other things that would be more true and more relevant that will never get funded because there's no ROI. So then we say the preponderance of data shows such and such, but it was the preponderance of data all in this one little area of the whole picture based on incentives. So it's misinforming, even if it's all true, right? So then we have to say, like, does the fact that science needs funded and is done by people with egos and with politics involved, does that fuck up the epistemics of it? Yeah, of course it does. And it doesn't completely fuck it up. So ultimately, for me, I actually go into the science article. I look at the methodology. I look at if the methodology makes sense. I try to look at all of the literature and try to do kind of structured literature review. Then I try to find experts in the field who disagree and see if I can find out why they disagree, take the perspectives, and I can start to make sense of it, right? So are the people who say just trust the institutions, are they right? No, the WHO got this wrong from the beginning, again and again. Like it's almost a perfect record of getting things wrong. And many of the main universities that were doing epidemiological models were like bad. They're pretty bad. And so we should just trust the authorities. It's just silly. That's just not paying attention. On the other hand, and, we can see the WHO and the Gates Foundation and places like that doing randomized control trials on antivirals for use in the intensive case, which is once people are in hospitals, when in the entire field of medicine, antivirals almost only work immediately after exposure, not once you already have a severe illness. And so it's like, that doesn't even, why would anyone even do that trial? That doesn't even make sense. I mean, yes, you might want to see if like by surprise it helps late stage people, because that'd be cool, but also include early stage, which is where there's really only any chance. But if you do late stage and then say it doesn't work and generalize it as if to early stage, maybe you're just really being kind of dull and not paying attention to the entire body of antiviral knowledge.
Well, maybe.
Or maybe you want to show that Trump was an idiot and do an information warfare piece that attacks hydroxychloroquine, or maybe because you're a Democrat or a supporter or just hate him or whatever it is. Or maybe you have a drug that you really like and the generic drugs that nobody's going to make any money on, it would be better to show are ineffective. Now, are people that fucked up? Yeah. Like that kind of information warfare is a real thing. And so it's important to know that the information we're being exposed to has agendas attached to it. And the agendas are not always the ones they say they are. The agendas are usually complex. So now, then the other side that says the entire thing is nonsense, that this is basically a flu, nobody's really dying. That's also just gibberish. And all you have to do is call some ICU doctors in New York and ask about their experience, or in Italy, and you'll never fucking say that again, which I did, early on. I was talking to them and working with them.
How was that? How was that? What did they say?
They were describing seeing disease progression that was unlike anything that they had seen before. The whole ground glass opacities in the lung, the rate at which people would degrade and break down, the complete failure of ventilation to do what they would normally think it to do in pneumonias. They were very boggled by the pathology. It didn't follow anything that they could make sense of at all. And then they were also completely fucking devastated, just putting people on intubation and taking them off dead all day. And having to go in without PPE and without adequate PPE, and having to it's a trip, because if the doctors or nurses who decide to go work mostly would quarantine themselves at a hotel, and some were just staying in their car or whatever, because they don't want to go back by their family and possibly kill their family. But that also means that they know that they might be leaving their children parentless because they don't want to leave these people dying. So it's intense. And there's a massive disrespect to that whole thing when you just say the whole thing was a farce, because you didn't even do the research deep enough to try to figure it out. Now, that side, though, that says the whole thing is a farce because of just some control agenda. Are there control agendas? Yes, of course there are. And the thing isn't a farce, and it is being utilized opportunistically. The whole don't let a good crisis go to waste. Well, if